Welcome back. Tonight we return to the house at 347. Last time, Margot Chen inherited a house that doesn't obey the usual rules of time or reality. Doors opened to different decades, clocks refused to agree, and the tenants included both the living and the dead. But tonight, things take a darker turn. A murder that both has and hasn't yet happened places one of their own, Dr. Edmund Ashford, under suspicion. We'll see how Margot and her unlikely household work together across timelines to uncover the truth, and how a new arrival, Daniel from the coffee shop, becomes part of the story the house itself seems to be writing. So, settle in, let your breathing slow, and drift with me into a story where time doesn't move forward. It folds quietly like a blanket around you. Chapter 3: The Accusation. The newspaper arrived on a Tuesday that was actually a Wednesday, slipped under Margot's door by someone who couldn't possibly have been there. She'd grown used to this sort of thing in the 2 weeks since the incident with the entity. The house had developed a habit of delivering things when they were needed, rather than when they were expected. This morning's delivery was different. The paper was from 1894, still smelling of fresh ink despite being over a century old, and Edmund's name dominated the front page. Physician accused of poisoning patient Dr. E. Ashford to stand trial for murder of Lord Pemberton. Margot read the article 3 times before accepting what it said. Edmund, who spent his evenings writing papers about antiseptic procedures that wouldn't be accepted for another decade, who regularly slipped through time to steal antibiotics to save children from scarlet fever, was accused of deliberately poisoning a peer of the realm. She found him in the kitchen, which currently existed in at least 3 different decades. The refrigerator from 2024 stood next to an icebox from 1894, while a 1950s electric kettle whistled on a Victorian coal stove. Edmund sat at the table, reading the same newspaper with the kind of calm that suggested shock rather than acceptance. "It's tomorrow," he said without looking up. "The death. Lord Pemberton dies tomorrow of what they're calling arsenic poisoning." "But you didn't do it." "Of course I didn't. I've been treating his heart condition with digitalis, foxglove extract, but in the wrong dose, or to someone unfamiliar with the symptoms." He rubbed his temples. "It could look like poisoning." Constance swept in, her bustle navigating the multi-temporal kitchen. "I've been checking the other papers. The Times, the Telegraph, even the gossip rags. They're all running the story, but the details don't match. Some say Lord Pemberton's already dead. Others say he's dying. One claims he recovered completely and is accusing you of attempted murder." "Timeline contamination," Felix said, entering with his ever-present recording equipment. "When an event becomes temporally significant, it starts existing in multiple states simultaneously. Schrödinger's murder, if you will. Less quantum physics, more practical help," Margot said. "Edmund, what actually happened? Or what will happen?" Edmund set down the paper. "Lord Pemberton has been my patient for 6 months. Chronic heart failure, complicated by his refusal to reduce his port consumption or follow any dietary recommendations. Yesterday, my yesterday, 1894's yesterday, his son, William, demanded I increase the digitalis dose. Said his father was getting worse. Did you?" "No. The dose was already at maximum safe levels. Any more would risk toxicity." He laughed bitterly. Ironic, really. I'm being accused of poisoning when I specifically refused to administer a poisonous dose. Tommy materialized in his usual fashion, appearing between one blink and the next. Just been to tomorrow, he announced, helping himself to biscuits that existed in 1952. Lord Pemberton's definitely dead. Saw the body myself. Well, through a window, while running from a constable, but definitely dead. Tommy, you can't just... Margot started. Course I can. That's what I do. He produced a piece of paper from his pocket. Nicked this from the coroner's office. Post-mortem report dated day after tomorrow. They crowded around the document. It was official, stamped and signed, declaring Lord Pemberton dead of arsenic poisoning. But something was wrong with it. The ink kept shifting, words rearranging themselves as they watched. Temporal uncertainty, Constance said. The report can't settle on a single version because the timeline isn't fixed yet. Then we can change it, Margot said. Prevent the murder. Save Edmund. Can't prevent something that's already happened, Mrs. Holloway said, drifting through the wall. She'd taken to doing that more often lately, claiming doors were for people too attached to linear space. But you can prove it happened differently than they think. We need evidence, Edmund said. In my time, the law operates on evidence, not temporal probability. Then we investigate, Margot decided. All of us, across all our timelines. Felix, can you record conversations from 1894? Already am. He held up a modified smartphone that shouldn't have worked but did. The house's temporal field lets me capture sound from any era, though playback's tricky. Yesterday, I accidentally recorded Next Christmas. Constance, you have access to Victorian society. Can you visit Lord Pemberton? I attended his wife's funeral 20 years ago, or last month, depending on how you count. I could call on him to pay my respects. Tommy. Already on it, the boy said, vanishing mid-sentence. Margot turned to Edmund. We're going to solve this. The house brought us together for a reason. The house doesn't care about human justice, Edmund said quietly. It preserves moments, not people. Maybe. But I do, and I'm the anchor now. She went upstairs to change, choosing clothes from the wardrobe that had been gradually filling with period-appropriate options. Today, it offered her a practical Victorian day dress that somehow fit perfectly, despite her never providing measurements. The house, she'd learned, was thoughtful about details. As she dressed, she noticed something odd in the mirror. Her reflection was normal, but behind it, like a double exposure, she could see another room, another time. A man in expensive Victorian dress stood at a desk, mixing something in a glass. His face was younger, crueler somehow, than the portrait she'd seen in the newspaper. William Pemberton, the son. She watched him pour white powder into a bottle labeled Digitalis, Dr. E. Ashford. He was careful, methodical, wearing gloves she recognized as Edmund's own medical gloves, probably stolen from his bag. The vision faded as quickly as it had come, leaving Margot staring at her own shocked face. She ran back downstairs, but the kitchen was empty except for a note in Constance's precise handwriting. Gone to 1894. Back for tea. Unless paradox. See, Felix's flat was locked. A sign on the door reading, "Recording, do not disturb. This means you, Tommy." She could hear voices through the door, speaking in the clipped tones of Victorian English. She found Edmund in his study, surrounded by medical texts from multiple centuries. He'd spread them out like a timeline of human understanding, from humoral theory to germ theory to genetic medicine. "I saw something," she said, "in the mirror. William Pemberton poisoning your medicine." Edmund looked up sharply. "That's not possible. My medical bag is always—" He stopped. "Except when I'm treating patients. I leave it in the anteroom. Would William have access? He lives in the house. He'd have every opportunity." Edmund stood, pacing to the window that currently showed 3 different views of the street simultaneously. But why? He inherits regardless. Lord Pemberton changed his will months ago, cutting out his younger son entirely. William gets everything. "Unless he's in a hurry," Mrs. Holloway said, materializing in her preferred armchair. "I knew a William Pemberton once. Different one, of course. Or maybe the same. Time's confusing when you're dead. But he had debts. Gambling debts. The kind that come with consequences if not paid." "You think he's killing his father for inheritance money?" "I think people have killed for less, and framing the controversial doctor who insists invisible creatures cause disease. That's just convenient." Tommy popped back into existence, clutching a leather journal. "Found this in William's room. Tomorrow, when everyone's at the funeral." He handed it to Edmund. "You might want to read the marked pages." The journal was damning. Page after page of William's debts, his desperate schemes, his growing resentment of his father's longevity. And near the end, a detailed plan. Increase the digitalis request, steal the medicine when Edmund refused, add arsenic, return the contaminated bottle. "This is evidence," Edmund said, "but from the wrong time. I can't present a journal that won't be written until after the murder." "Then we need evidence from the right time," Margot said. "Something that exists in 1894. Constance returned through the front door, which was impressive since they were on the 2nd floor. The house had apparently rearranged itself for her convenience. "Lord Pemberton's already ill," she reported. "I saw him 20 minutes ago. 1894's 20 minutes. He's showing signs of arsenic poisoning, but also digitalis toxicity. Someone's given him both." "William's trying to make sure," Edmund said. "Frame me while guaranteeing his father's death." "There's more," Constance continued. "I spoke with the housemaid. She saw William in your medical bag yesterday. Told him off for it, but he claimed he was fetching something for his father." "Would she testify? A housemaid's word against a gentleman's? In 1894? Constance shook her head. "We need more." Felix burst in, trailing cables and looking triumphant. "I've got it. Audio recording from yesterday. 1894's yesterday. The house preserved it in the walls. He connected his equipment to a speaker that belonged in a museum. Listen." Static filled the room, then voices, crystal clear despite the century between them. "Father's taking too long to die." William's voice, cold and certain. "You said the digitalis would work." Another man, nervous. "Ashford won't increase the dose. Sanctimonious fool. But I have another solution. Arsenic in his medicine bottle. He'll be blamed. Father will be dead, and I'll have the money by week's end." "That's murder. That's business. Do you want your payment or not?" The recording clicked off. "That's proof," Margot said. "That's a recording that won't be invented for another 30 years. Edmund corrected. "No court would accept it." "Then we make them accept it another way," Tommy said. We just need someone from 1894 to hear it, someone important, someone who can't be ignored. They all turned to look at Constance. "Oh, absolutely not," she said. "I am not claiming to be a medium channeling voices from the spirit realm." "But you could," Margot insisted. "Victorian society loves spiritualists. They'd believe it. They'd believe I'm hysterical. They'd investigate," Edmund said slowly. "If someone of your standing made such a claim, they'd have to investigate. Check William's rooms, his papers, find the physical evidence that must exist." Constance sighed dramatically. "The things I do for my tenants." The plan came together quickly. Constance would host a séance, a perfectly respectable Victorian entertainment. She'd invite key people, the investigating inspector, Lord Pemberton's lawyer, even William himself. Felix would use the house's temporal properties to play the recording through the spirit realm. Tommy would ensure certain evidence appeared at convenient moments. "What about Lord Pemberton?" Margot asked. "Can we save him?" Edmund shook his head. "He's already taken the poisoned medicine. In my timeline, he dies tomorrow morning, but we can save my reputation and see justice done." "That's not enough." "It has to be," Mrs. Holloway said gently. "The house preserves what was, not what we wish had been. Lord Pemberton's death is fixed, but Edmund's fate isn't." The séance was scheduled for that evening, 1994's evening. Margot found herself in the peculiar position of preparing for an event that was happening in the past. The house helped, opening doors to rooms that existed in the right timeline, providing appropriate clothing and props. She found herself in Constance's flat, which was firmly rooted in 1894. Gas lamps cast shadows that moved independently of their flames, and the air smelled of coal smoke and pomade. Constance was arranging chairs around a round table, despite her obvious distaste for the theatrical. "I published a paper on the fraudulent nature of spiritualism just last year," she muttered. "The irony is painful, but you're not being fraudulent. You're using actual temporal phenomena to reveal truth. Try explaining that to the Royal Society." Guests began arriving at 8 o'clock sharp. The inspector, a thin man with suspicious eyes. The lawyer, round and nervous. 3 society ladies who'd invited themselves. And William Pemberton, trying to look grief-stricken, despite his father still being alive. "I hope this brings comfort," William said, taking Constance's hand. "Father's suffering is terrible to witness." "I'm sure it is," Constance replied dryly. They sat around the table, hands linked as convention demanded. Margot stood in the corner, invisible to the 1894 guests, but able to observe. Felix was in his flat, 3 decades and 2 floors away, equipment ready. Tommy was wherever Tommy went when he was preparing to cause helpful chaos. "Spirits," Constance intoned, her skepticism barely hidden. "We seek truth about Lord Pemberton's illness. Speak to us across the veil." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the gas lamps dimmed. The temperature dropped, and Felix's recording began to play, not from any speaker, but from the air itself, as if the house were remembering out loud. "Father's taking too long to die." William went white. That's not possible." "You said the digitalis would work." "Stop this." William stood, but the society ladies held him in place, fascinated by the supernatural display. "Ashford won't increase the dose. Sanctimonious fool." But I have another solution. Arsenic in his medicine bottle. It's a trick, William shouted. Ashford's behind this. Dr. Ashford is at the hospital, the inspector said slowly. Has been all evening. I had him under observation. The recording continued, damning word by damning word. And then, because Tommy had a sense of drama, papers began materializing on the table. Bills of sale for arsenic, the altered will William had prepared, a confession letter he'd written but not yet sent. Temporal displacement, Constance said smoothly. The spirits bring evidence from past and future alike. The inspector examined the papers. They were real, solid, dated appropriately. Whatever Tommy's method, the evidence was undeniable. Mr. Pemberton, the inspector said formally, I'll need you to come with me. William tried to run. He made it 3 steps before running into Mrs. Holloway, who was invisible to everyone but Margot. He bounced off her substantial non-presence and fell directly into the inspector's arms. The spirits themselves impede your escape, one of the society ladies gasped. The floorboards warped, Constance said quickly, ever the skeptic even while hosting a séance. Old houses, you know. Later, after the arrests and statements and tedious legal procedures that somehow spanned 3 different decades, they gathered again in Felix's flat. Edmund was exhausted but free. His medical bag recovered with the poisoned digitalis as evidence. Lord Pemberton died this morning, he said quietly. His last words were an apology. He'd suspected William, but hoped he was wrong. I'm sorry we couldn't save him, Margot said. You saved me. That's more than I expected. He managed a small smile. Though I'm now infamous as the doctor involved in a spiritualist revelation, my reputation for scientific rationalism is quite ruined. You'll be vindicated, Tommy said confidently. Seen it myself. 20 years from now, you're considered a pioneer. They name a ward after you. 20 years? Give or take a decade. Time's fuzzy about hospitals. Felix was reviewing his recordings, grinning. The acoustic properties were incredible. The house actually amplified the sound through temporal resonance. I could write a paper on this if anyone would believe it. No one ever believes the truth about this house, Constance said. That's what protects it. Margot's phone buzzed. Still 3:47 p.m., but the message was clear. New tenant tomorrow. The coffee shop owner. He's been finding temporal artifacts in his till. Time to explain. -M. She looked up to find everyone watching her. What? The house is matchmaking, Mrs. Holloway said with delight. It does that sometimes. Brings people together across impossible odds. It's just a new tenant. The coffee shop owner? Constance raised an eyebrow. The one you've been visiting every morning? The one who keeps finding Victorian pennies that you definitely haven't been leaving as an excuse to talk? I haven't. But she had been visiting the coffee shop daily. And maybe she had been using Tommy's ability to move objects through time to leave interesting coins. His name's Daniel, Tommy volunteered. He's been dreaming about the house, seeing it in reflections. The house likes him. The house doesn't. The house definitely has opinions about romantic compatibility, Felix interrupted. My ex got lost for 3 hours trying to visit. Kept ending up at different buildings. The house was very clear about its feelings. Edmund stood, gathering his medical bag. I should return to the hospital. They'll need explanation for my absence. though I doubt they'll believe the truth. Tell them you were ill, Constance suggested. Temporal displacement syndrome, very fashionable among forward-thinking physicians. After everyone dispersed, Margot sat alone in her flat, watching the sun set over a London that existed in at least 3 different time periods. The city lights were gas, electric, and something that might have been holographic, all overlapping in a way that should have been impossible, but wasn't. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Miss Chen? This is Daniel Okoye from the coffee shop. I know this sounds strange, but I've been finding these coins in my till, and they led me to an address. Number 7, Bellwether Lane. I'm standing outside, but the building keeps changing. One moment it's Victorian, the next it's modern, and I swear I just saw someone in medieval armor in the 3rd floor window. That's just the Thursday night, Margot said. He's harmless. Mostly lost. Look, Daniel, this is going to sound impossible, but nothing's impossible, he interrupted. My grandmother used to say that time isn't a river, it's an ocean. Everything's happening all at once if you know how to navigate. Margot smiled. Would you like to come in for tea? Fair warning, the house exists in multiple timelines simultaneously. Several of the tenants are technically dead, and we just solved a murder that hasn't happened yet. There was a pause. Then, Earl Grey or English breakfast? Whatever the house decides to serve, it has opinions. Perfect. I'll bring scones. They're from tomorrow. I've been experimenting with future baking. Don't ask me how I know they're from tomorrow. I just do. She went downstairs to open the door, finding the house had already rearranged itself to make a good impression. The hallway was pure Victorian elegance, gas lamps casting a warm glow, the smell of beeswax and roses in the air. Daniel stood on the doorstep, a box of impossibly fresh scones in one hand, a newspaper from next week in the other. He was tall and lanky, with an easy smile and eyes that seemed to see through time itself, deep brown with flecks of gold that caught the gaslight, electric light, and something that might have been starlight. The house has been calling me, he said simply, in dreams, in reflections, in the pattern of coffee grounds. I think I'm supposed to be here. The house does tend to collect people, Margot agreed, trying not to notice how his presence made the hallway feel warmer, more solid, as if he helped anchor things just by existing. And it collects them for reasons, Daniel said, looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. It told me about you. Not in words, but in the way the coffee grounds arranged themselves every morning. Always the same pattern. Someone who would understand that time isn't linear but layered, like sediment, like memory, like the best kind of love. That's quite a reading from Coffee Grounds, Margot said, her voice not quite steady. My grandmother taught me to read temporal signs, but this... He gestured between them, and she felt the air shimmer with possibility. This doesn't need reading. It's just there, clear as 3:47 p.m. Come in, she said. I'll introduce you to everyone. Fair warning, Mrs. Holloway's dead. Constance is from 1894, and Tommy might pick your pockets, but he always returns things, eventually. Brilliant, Daniel said, stepping over the threshold. As he passed her, she caught his scent, coffee and tomorrow's rain, and something like home. I was worried it would be boring. As the door closed behind him, Margot felt the house settle contentedly around them, Another piece falling into place. Another story beginning. Somewhere in the walls, clocks from 7 different centuries chimed in harmony, all showing 3:47 p.m. Chapter 4: The Investigation. Daniel Okoye moved into flat 1B on a Thursday that everyone agreed was actually a Thursday, which was unusual enough to be noteworthy. His belongings arrived in boxes that seemed to contain more than they should. A 2-bedroom flat's worth of furniture emerging from 3 modest cartons. Temporal compression, he explained to Margot as they watched a full-sized sofa unfold from a space that should have held books at most. She'd insisted on helping him move in, telling herself it was her duty as landlady, ignoring the way her pulse quickened when he smiled. "My grandmother taught me." She said our family had a gift for folding space. I thought she meant origami. The sofa was mid-century modern, which was anachronistic for the Victorian room, but somehow looked right. When Daniel sat on it and patted the space beside him, Margot found herself accepting without hesitation. "This feels dangerous," she said, not entirely referring to the temporal anomalies. "Everything worth doing is a little dangerous," Daniel replied, looking at her in a way that made time actually stop, not metaphorically, but literally. The clock ceased ticking for a full 3 seconds. "Did you feel that?" Margot asked. "The house approving," Daniel said softly. "It does that when something is particularly right." The house, Margot had noticed, had a way of making incompatible things compatible. "Your grandmother knew about temporal anomalies. She called them soft places in the world. Said they ran in families, like eye color or the ability to curl your tongue." He demonstrated the tongue thing, making Margot laugh. "She used to take me to places where time felt different. Old churches, certain forests, the queue at the DMV." Tommy appeared on the sofa before it had fully solidified, bouncing slightly on cushions that were still deciding what decade they belonged to. He looked exactly as he always did, 11 3/4, frozen at that perfect age between childhood and adolescence, though his eyes held centuries. "You're the coffee man," he announced. "You make good scones. Going to teach me?" "Already did. Next Tuesday. You were quite good at it, though you did steal half the chocolate chips." Tommy grinned. "Haven't done that yet. Now I've got to, don't I? Otherwise it's a paradox." This was the thing about Daniel that made him perfect for the house. He treated temporal irregularities as minor logistics problems rather than impossibilities. When Mrs. Holloway walked through his wall during dinner that first night, he simply passed her the salt cellar, which she couldn't hold but appreciated anyway. "The coffee shop's been experiencing temporal leaks," he explained. "Not full displacement, just moments bleeding through. Sometimes I serve customers who won't exist for another decade. Sometimes I get orders from last century, the tills full of currency from 7 different time periods. That must be confusing for regular customers. They don't notice. The leaks only affect those already touched by temporal anomalies. To everyone else, it's just a coffee shop with particularly good pastries." He smiled, though they can never quite remember what they ordered after they leave. It was 3 days later when things started shifting, or perhaps they'd been shifting all along, and only now became noticeable. Margot woke to find her reflection missing from the bathroom mirror. Not the mirror broken, not her invisible. The reflection simply wasn't there. She could see the bathroom behind her, could see her toothbrush floating as she held it, but no Margot. "That's new," she told the house. It creaked apologetically. She found Constance in the kitchen, staring at a newspaper from 1894 that was simultaneously blank and full of text. "The words keep changing," Constance said. "Every time I blink, it's a different story. Look, now it says Queen Victoria abdicated. Now she's been crowned Emperor of Mars. Now she's never existed at all." Felix rushed in, equipment beeping urgently. "We have a problem. A big one. Someone's been pulling threads from the timeline, and the whole fabric's starting to unravel." "The might-have-beens again." "No, this is different. More precise, surgical almost." He showed them his readings. "Someone's been removing specific moments. Small ones, seemingly insignificant, a conversation here, a decision there, but they're all connected to the house." Edmund appeared in the doorway, looking troubled. "3 of my patients have forgotten they were ill. Not recovered, forgotten. Their medical records show they were never sick, but I remember treating them. And Tommy's edges are blurring," Mrs. Holloway announced, drifting through the wall. "I saw him in 3 places at once this morning, all slightly different ages." Tommy materialized, and indeed his edges were uncertain, flickering between 11 and 12 and back again, though never reaching the 18 that had been trying to manifest. "Something's calling me, or parts of me, the 3 timelines that made me. They're trying to separate." Daniel arrived with a tray of pastries that smelled of yesterday and tomorrow simultaneously, the coffee shops having the same problem. Temporal leaks are becoming floods. This morning I served the same customer as a child, adult, and elderly woman, all at the same table. "Someone's editing history," Margot said, "but more carefully than before. They're not trying to erase us. They're trying to split us apart." From the parlor came the sound of piano music. Not Eliza's usual trapped phrase, but something chaotic. Notes from different songs colliding. They rushed in to find her flickering rapidly through different ages, her playing equally unstable. "Can't hold the timeline," she gasped. "Something's pulling at the threads that keep me in 1887, trying to spread me across all the years I should have lived." "It's me," a voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned. A boy stood there, Tommy's face, but different. Older in the eyes, more precise in his movements, wearing clothes that belonged to no particular era because he'd assembled them from multiple timelines. "Thomas," Tommy breathed, "but you're not supposed to exist yet. You're a might still be." "I was," Thomas corrected. "The blue door in the basement. I've been behind it, waiting, deciding whether to exist. The might-have-beens attack weakened the boundaries enough for me to step through, but my existence is causing ripples." "You're the distortion?" Felix asked, scanning him with his equipment. "Not intentionally. I'm a paradox, a might-have-been who chose to be. The timeline doesn't know how to accommodate me." He looked at Tommy. "I'm what you would have been if you'd grown up in just one timeline instead of 3. More stable, but less flexible. We're 2 solutions to the same temporal equation. And the timeline is trying to choose between you," Constance said, understanding. "It can't support both versions without—" The house shuddered, not violently but deeply, like tectonic plates shifting. Pictures fell from walls, rehung themselves, fell again. The piano played itself, Eliza's hands moving without her volition. "We're unraveling the house," Thomas said quietly. 2 Tommies are 1 too many. No, Margot said firmly. The house has room for impossibilities. We just need to teach it how to hold you both. How? She thought about the might-have-beens, how they'd tried to exist by erasing others. Then about the house's growing consciousness, its ability to learn and adapt. Not by choosing between you, but by accepting you as parallel solutions, like railroad tracks, separate but running alongside each other, never intersecting, but always connected. Quantum superposition, Felix said excitedly. Not one or the other, but both simultaneously, collapsed only when observed directly. We'd need an anchor point, Edmund said. Something to stabilize both timelines. Eliza suddenly stopped playing, her form solidifying at age 20. Music, she said. I've been stuck playing the same phrase for over a century. But if I played 2 melodies, 1 for each Tommy, harmonizing but distinct. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. Not her trapped phrase, but something new, something that had never existed before. A melody that split into 2 parts, interweaving, but never quite touching, like DNA strands or railroad tracks or 2 boys who were the same but different. Tommy and Thomas stood on opposite sides of the piano, their forms stabilizing. As the music continued, their edges became clear, defined, separate but related. It's working, Felix breathed, watching his readings normalize. But the effort was draining Eliza. Her form began to fade, the music faltering. I can't hold it alone. Daniel stepped forward, placing his hands over hers on the keys. They passed through her translucent fingers, but somehow made contact with the piano. The moment their hands aligned, Margot felt it. A spark of temporal energy that had nothing to do with the house and everything to do with them. My grandmother taught me this too, Daniel said, his breath warm against her ear as he leaned in to reach the keys properly. How to play music that exists in multiple times. How to harmonize with someone whose rhythm matches yours, even if you're in different decades. Together, they played, the living man and the ghost woman, creating a temporal harmony that held both Tommies in place. But Margot was barely aware of the cosmic significance, too focused on the way Daniel's presence behind her felt like coming home. Like every scattered moment of her life was suddenly, perfectly synchronized. The house resonated with the music, its walls humming in harmony. The house is learning, Mrs. Holloway said wonderingly, learning to hold parallel possibilities. As the music reached a crescendo, something shifted. The air in the room crystallized for a moment, then relaxed. When it cleared, Tommy and Thomas stood solid and real, occupying the same space but not colliding, like an optical illusion that showed 2 different images depending on how you looked. We're both here, they said in unison, then laughed at the synchronization. Both real, Tommy added. Both impossible, Thomas continued. Both home, they finished together. Eliza lifted her hands from the keys, and for the first time in over a century, she stood up from the piano bench. I'm free, she said wonderingly. The new music, it broke the loop. She took a tentative step, then another. She was still transparent, still dead, but no longer trapped in her endless recital preparation. I can move through the house now, she said, tears streaming down her ghostly cheeks. I can finally leave this room. Where will you go? Margot asked. Nowhere. everywhere. I want to see what's changed. I want to meet my niece properly. She looked at Constance. Hello, dear. I've been watching you all these years. You've grown into quite the scientist. Constance, for once, was speechless. The house settled around them, its temporal fluctuations smoothing into something that wasn't stable, would never be stable, but was balanced. 2 Tommies, 1 freed ghost, and a growing understanding that impossibilities didn't have to fight for existence. They could coexist, harmonize, create something richer than any single timeline could offer. This is going to complicate things, Edmund said, but he was smiling. Everything here is complicated, everyone replied in unison. That evening, they held a celebration dinner. Eliza joined them at the table for the first time, unable to eat but delighting in conversation. Tommy and Thomas had developed a system. One would start sentences, the other would finish them, or they'd speak in harmony for emphasis. It's like having a brother, Tommy said. Who's also yourself, Thomas added, but not yourself. It's complicated. Everything here is complicated, everyone said again, and the phrase was becoming not just a catchphrase, but a philosophy. Daniel's coffee shop had stabilized too, the temporal leaks controlled rather than chaotic. I'm thinking of advertising it, he said. Coffee from across time, yesterday's grounds, tomorrow's brew. That would attract attention, Constance warned. From people who already know about temporal anomalies, might be good to have a gathering place, somewhere less intensive than the house. A temporal cafe, Margot mused. I like it. After dinner, she found herself in the conservatory with the blue door from the basement, which had somehow migrated upstairs. It stood between 2 potted plants, looking perfectly ordinary, except for the way it existed slightly outside normal space. For other might still be's, the house explained through the arrangement of leaves. A waiting room for possibilities that haven't decided yet. How many are there? Every choice creates them. Most fade immediately, but some linger, waiting to see if there's room for them to exist. The house rustled thoughtfully. Thomas taught me that not all possibilities have to fight for space. Some can share. Her phone buzzed. 3:47 p.m., as always. The message read, Parallel processing achieved. Harmony established. Thank you for teaching me that or can become and. The house. Looking through the conservatory's glass walls, she could see her impossible family settling in for the evening. Edmund and Jonathan comparing medical notes across centuries. Constance and Eliza, aunt and niece, finally talking after decades of temporal separation. Felix documenting everything with equipment that now registered parallel timelines as normal. Mrs. Holloway teaching the Tommies card games that hadn't been invented yet. And Daniel, looking up at her through the glass, raising a cup of coffee that existed in perfect temporal balance. Not quantum superposition, but something gentler, more controlled. The coffee shop owner who'd walked into her impossible life and made it feel more possible. The house hummed contentedly around them, its consciousness growing more sophisticated each day, learning not just to preserve or allow change, but to hold multiple realities in harmony. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The blue door suggested more might still be waiting to decide their existence. The investigators from the Temporal Refugee Association were due to visit, and somewhere in the walls, clocks from 7 different centuries were learning to tick in harmony rather than unison. but tonight, everything was exactly as impossible as it should be. Thanks for spending some time with me tonight. I hope I helped you unwind and drift a little closer to sleep. If you're enjoying these readings, there's a whole library of full books and cozy chapters waiting for you over on my Patreon. If you are already a member, then I thank you. It includes exclusive content, bonus episodes, and early access to new releases. You can also become a YouTube member, if you haven't already, to listen ad-free and explore over 280 relaxing readings anytime you like. I'd love to have you there. Sweet dreams, and I'll see you in the next one.